Okay, guys, we're going to make another stop in the White House with Chester A. Arthur. The 21st president took office after the death of President James Garfield. As president from 1881 to 1885, Arthur advocated for civil service reform. A Vermont native, he became active in the Republican Party politics in 1850s in a New York City lawyer. In 1871, in an era of political machines and patronage, Arthur was named to the powerful position of customs collector from the post of New York. He later was removed from the job by President Rutherford Hayes in an attempt to reform the spoils system. Elected to vice presidency in 1880, Arthur became president after Garfield died following an assassination attempt by a disgruntled job seeker. While in office, Arthur rose above partnership and in 1883 signed the Petition Act, which required government jobs to be distributed based on merit. Suffering from poor health, he did not run for a re-election in 1884. Chester Allen Arthur was born on October 5th, 1829 in Fairfield, Vermont. His Baptist minister father, William Arthur, hailed from Ireland, and his mother, Maverna Stone Arthur, was from Vermont. During Chester Arthur's childhood, his family moved around Vermont and upstate New York for his father's work. Did you know? Before he moved into the White House, Chester Arthur hired designer and stained glass artist Louis Comfort Tiffany, whose life spanned from 1848 to 1933, to redecorate the staterooms. During the process, more than 20 wagon loads of furnishings from previous presidential administrations were cleared out and auctioned off. Chester, or Chet as he was known, attended Union College in Schenectady, New York. After graduating in 1848, he became a school teacher and studied law at the State and National Law School, now defunct, in Boston Spa, New York. In the early 1850s, he served as the principal of schools in North Pownell, Vermont, and Chahoos, New York. In 1854, he was admitted to the New York bar and began practicing law in New York City. In 1859, Arthur married Ellen Nell Lewis Herndon, whose life spanned from 1837 to 1880, the Virginia-born daughter of a U.S. naval officer. The couple had 2 children who survived to adulthood: Chester Arthur Jr., whose life spanned from 1864 to 1837, and Ellen Hernan Arthur, whose life spanned from 1871 to 1915. Nell Arthur died of pneumonia at the age of 42, less than 2 years before her husband became president. In the White House, Chester Arthur's sister, Mary Elroy, whose life spanned from 1841 to 1917 often took the role of hostess for social functions. Chester Arthur began his legal career in New York City and as a young attorney won several high-profile civil rights cases. In 1855, he successfully represented Elizabeth Jennings Graham, whose life spanned from 1830 to 1901, a black woman who had been denied a seat on a Manhattan streetcar due to her race. The case helped lead to discrimination of public transportation in New York City. Arthur was also involved in the so-called Lemon slave case, in which the New York Supreme Court ruled in 1860 that slaves being transferred to slave states through New York would be freed. During this time, Arthur joined the Republican Party, which was established by anti-slavery activists in 1854. Arthur became a member of the New York State militia in the late 1850s, although he never saw combat. During the American Civil War, he was quartermaster for the state of New York, responsible for organizing food and supplies for the Union soldiers. In 1871, President Ulysses Grant, a Republican, named Arthur the customs collector for the port of New York. In an era of political machines, the patron system of political appointments, Republican political boss Roscoe Conkling, whose life spanned from 1829 to 1888, a U.S. Senator from New York, was instrumental in helping Arthur obtain the important position, which controlled some 1,000 employees. Arthur in turn gave government jobs to Conkling's supporter, who contributed part of their salaries to the Republican Party. After Rutherford Hayes became president, he ousted Arthur from the job in 1878. In an attempt to reform the New York custom house and spoils system, Hayes did not seek a re-election in 1880, and at that year's Republican National Convention, the choice for presidential nominee had delegates deadlocked between Ulysses Grant, a U.S. president from 1869 to 1877, and James Blaine, a U.S. senator from Maine. On the 36th ballot, James Garfield, a Civil War general and congressman from Ohio, was chosen as a compromise candidate. Chester Arthur was selected as his running mate. In the general election, Garfield and Arthur defeated Democrat nominee Winfield Hancock and his running mate William English, who were sworn into office on March 4, 1881. Less than 4 months later, on July 2nd, Garfield was shot by Charles Giancho, a mentally unstable, disgruntled political job seeker, at a train station in Washington, D.C. Although Garfield initially survived the shooting, he battled infections and died 2 months later at the age of 49. On September 19th, in the early hours of September 20th, Arthur was sworn in as president at his Manhattan brownstone at 123 Lexington Avenue by a New York State judge. 2 days later in Washington, D.C., Arther was given the oath of office of Chief of Justice in the U.S. Supreme Court. Arther was the second vice president to become a chief executive due to an assassination. Although Chester Arthur had risen to power through machine politics, once in the White House, he surprised Americans and aligned Cookling and other supporters, or alienated them, by moving past partnership. In January of 1883, he signed the Pendleton Civil Service Act, landmark legislation mandating that certain federal government jobs be distributed based on merit rather than political connections. The act also forbade workers from being fired for political reasons and prohibited compulsory political donations from employees. Additionally, the Pendleton Act allowed for the estimate of bipartisan civil service commission to enforce the law. In addition to civil service reform, Arthur tried with limited success to lower tariffs. He voted the Chinese Exclusive Act of 1882, which suspended Chinese immigration for 10 years. However, Congress overrode his veto. Arthur's administration also fought fraud in the U.S. Postal Service and pushed for modernization of U.S. Navy. In the White House, Arthur became known for his sartorial style and taste for fine furnishing. Nicknamed the gentleman boss, an elegant Arthur, he reportedly owned 80 pairs of pants. I'm a woman and I don't even own that many pants. Anyway, sometime around 1882, Arthur learned he was suffering from Bright's disease, a serious kidney ailment. He kept the condition a secret from the public. However, his poor health prevented him from actively seeking re-election in 1884. Instead, the Republicans chose Secretary of State James Blaine as their presidential nominee. Blaine was defeated by Democrat Grover Cleveland in the general election. After exiting the White House in March of 1885, Arthur returned to New York City to resume his legal career. There, his health continued to deteriorate, and on November 18, 1886, he died at the age of 57 at his home. Following a funeral in Manhattan, the former president was buried beside his wife in the Arthur family plot in Albany Royal Cemetery in Mendes, New York. And with that, I will see you in the next one.